I'm Adrian Ghobrial. The death of a Toronto police officer raising more questions than answers tonight. City News has learned that Constable Michael Thompson, a 10-year veteran of the Toronto Police Force who'd been with the drug squad for the last 2.5 years, died of a fentanyl overdose back in April. Thompson was sworn in as an officer in December 2006. He was a respected and well-liked member of the force. However, the details surrounding his death are disturbing. He was found in his home unresponsive and died in hospitals 3 days later. Toronto police confirmed after a coroner's report that the quantity of fentanyl found in his system was too large to have been caused by mere contact with the deadly drug. Police say Constable Thompson was a drug squad officer who had regular access to street-level drugs. Toronto police have since launched an investigation into what may have happened. What kind of access to drugs does he have?
Well, with all our officers at the drug squad and even some of our officers that work at the divisional level, they do have exposure to various illicit drugs. There are some very strict protocols that are in place, especially at the drug squad, when it comes to handling exhibits and storing of evidence. Part of what we did in the aftermath of Michael's death was to take a look at those protocols to make sure that if any changes need to be made, they were made. We did make a few changes, but as I said, there were some strict protocols in place. And at the end of the day, we don't know whether Michael took drugs from the unit or whether he bought them on the street. We may never know the answer to that question.
There's some concerns raised today about the types of jobs drug squad officers have to do. For those at home that don't understand the type of situations they're put in, can you expand on that a little bit?
A lot of times they're involved in undercover work where there is a huge risk and they're buying drugs and they're involved in the drug culture as a police officer, as somebody who is undercover. And there's a lot of high risk to that. There's a huge potential for violence if it's discovered that they're a police officer. A big stress on them as well to be playing that role, and it's something that we're always concerned with our officers.
Constable Thompson's death may also have an impact on arrests and upcoming court cases he was involved in. The release from TPS Communications also states that the service has learned that because of his death and the circumstances under which it happened, changes will be made to how these cases proceed, or not, through the justice system.
The range of possibilities is open now. Everything from it having a minor impact to cases being thrown out are all equally possible scenarios. It's really a question of the role this officer's evidence played in the strength of the Crown's case on a given trial. Obviously, this is a sad day, obviously, for this officer's family, but it's also a sad day for the justice system, given the role this officer has in court cases.
Now, neither the Ministry of the Attorney General nor Toronto Police could confirm just how many cases Constable Thompson was involved in, though City News has learned he does have several cases going before the courts. Ahead on City News, we're going to speak further with a defense attorney about the impacts this is going to have on court proceedings. Thanks, Amanda. Earlier at 5 and 6, we told you about Constable Michael Thompson, a 10-year veteran of the Toronto Police Force who'd been with the Toronto Police Drug Squad for the last 2.5 years. And today we learned that back in April, he died of a fentanyl overdose. Now, I'm currently joined by defense attorney Kim Schofield. You deal with drug cases, you specialize in them, and there is some serious questions surrounding just what was going to happen with cases moving forward that Constable Thompson is involved in. You currently have several cases upcoming with clients that he was involved with.
I do. So certainly the absence of a witness affects the reasonable prospect of conviction in any drug case. So just the fact that he's absent. Now, the fact that obviously he ingested an illegal substance may potentially put a cloud over certain cases, but I don't really think that aspect is particularly important in this case, but rather just the absence of that witness. Now, however, if he played a role like an exhibits officer, then perhaps it would have a greater effect on the viability of prosecutions going forward.
Could you see cases being withdrawn?
Absolutely, especially because of the witness's absence and potentially the role that he played and how integral the role is to the prosecution.
Obviously, this is a sad day first and foremost to hear this type of news. Your concerns, you've worked in this field for many years, you've dealt with many drug squad officers. Your concerns when you hear about a drug squad officer dying of a fentanyl overdose?
My concerns are really on a humanitarian basis, which is this. You have officers, and they're human, only human. They're exposed to large amounts of substances. Sometimes they're working in undercover capacities. They're involved in investigations where there's cash and drugs, and it's immediately available to them. Certain people will succumb to that temptation. So there should be oversight and there should be safeguards for the officers, but also for the public and for the administration of justice. There should be potentially random drug testing, and I don't know that that's being considered now, but I think it should be potentially on the table.
We heard today from Toronto Police that they believe this is an isolated incident. Constable Thompson and his death related to a fentanyl overdose. Do you believe it's an isolated incident, a drug squad officer using drugs?
I think it's an isolated incident that one has passed away from the ingestion of fentanyl, but isolated it is not as far as drug use and Toronto Drug Squad. And there's often clouds over cases, and it would be, I think, addressed with certain safeguards and perhaps some form of random drug testing. You have officers that rely on their integrity only, as opposed to safeguards and processes that will ensure the safety of the officers, safety of the public, and integrity of cases going forward.
In closing, we don't know, according to Toronto Police, whether or not he bought these drugs on the street, whether he took them off someone, or whether he took them from the unit, and we might never know that. But in your dealings in drug-related cases, how often has a case been thrown out because of misconduct by a drug squad officer?
Well, it's not common, but it's certainly not unheard of. We've seen cases recently involving the theft of items from drug squad officers, the planting of evidence in a case that I was actually involved in particular. So it seems to be, I don't know that it's isolated in drug cases, but it seems to occur much more often in drug cases.
Kim, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.